Good morning, everyone. A big hello and welcome to our last series of our introduction to FTA. I'm Ivy Heng, a senior manager in Singapore Business Federation FTA Education and Outreach team. Thank you for joining us today in our last webinar series. Should you have any FTA related query, please kindly email us at fta@sbf.org.sg. Or if you may wish to post your question in the Q&A function in Zoom, you may do so, and we will get back to you via email. So in the first series, my colleague Jason and Priscilla introduced an overview of Singapore FTAs and also talk about why do countries trade and why businesses take part in cross-border trade and investment. They also share the overall benefits of FTA. In the second series, our speaker from ESG share how FTA enhance the price competitiveness of your product. She also shared that FTA eliminated reduced custom duties if your product meets the origin criteria. She also shared the various facilitative FTA provisions applicable to your export business, such as direct shipments for the manufacturers. The back-to-back preferential certificate of origin, which is useful for traders who are involved in break bulk and re-export of goods in the region. So today, in our last series, I will be going through briefly on how to qualify your goods for tariff preference. This is the agenda for this morning. In this series, we will be bringing you through the technicalities to evaluate if your goods can qualify for FTA, its application procedures, and the various record-keeping requirements, and lastly, some best practice to ensure proper compliance. As mentioned in our first series by my colleague Jason, free trade agreements, FTA in short, contain many chapters, but they generally have three main components: trade in goods, trade in service, and investment chapter. And this morning, we will be exploring rules of origins, and often you will hear people saying ROO, and this is nested within the trade in goods chapter. Also, last week in our series 2, speaker from ESG mentioned about direct shipment. So if you are a manufacturer or exporter, you need to ensure your product satisfy the rules of origin criteria under the respective FTA in order for your importer to enjoy the preferential tariff at the importing country. In this short webinar, we will be going through these three key points. How to determine if your product qualifies. What is the origin criteria for your specific products? Highlighting the minimal operations that disqualify your products from using the FTAs. We shall first explore the how to determine your product origin status. So right in front of you, you will see a flow chart and may wish to follow this flow chart to determine your product origin status. The first tier would be wholly obtained, and the first tier would be wholly obtained or non-wholly obtained. The latter will apply more for manufactured goods or processed agriculture products. We will be going through the change in tariff classification, value add, process rules in the later slides. So what is wholly obtained? Wholly obtained means a product obtained or produced entirely in one country. Some examples are mineral products extracted from the soil, vegetables or plants grown and harvested, live animals born and raised in the country. In Singapore, the more common products for wholly obtained goods are ornamental fishes, arowana, and plants like orchids, and even aquaculture food fish. Last but not least, the waste and scraps that either collected locally or byproducts from manufacturing processes fit only for recycling. So how about non-wholly obtained goods? They are typically applicable for manufactured goods, which might apply for most of you. The origin criteria are generally classified into 3 categories. 1. Change in tariff classification, which means the harmonized system codes between the final product and its raw materials, which are not originating within the FTA, have to be different at a specific tariff classification. Next, value add criteria. Certain proportion of the cost for the final product has to be originated from one or more FTA countries. Lastly, process rules. Raw materials not originating from within the FTA have to undergo a specific set of processes. So now we talk about tariff classification. So tariff classification is the process of finding the most specific description in the harmonized system for the goods to be classified, HS code. So in short, it's the process to determine the correct HS code for the goods. But what is HS code? HS code stands for Harmonized System. It was developed by WCO, which is the World Customs Organization. It consists of 5,000 commodity groups covered in 99 chapters containing 21 sections. All products are classified into corresponding HS code, where it is harmonized at 6-digit level globally and up to 8-digit within ASEAN. Allow me to remind you that it is very important to classify your raw materials and finished goods into the correct HS code, as this will determine whether your goods meet this criteria and the corresponding import duties and relief that your customer might receive. So let's take an example on the chocolate bar, which has a HS code of 180632. For HS code at 6-digit level, the first 2 digits are actually known as the chapter levels. It's to identify the chapter the goods are classified. So for the case of chocolate bar, 18 is the chapter of cocoa and cocoa preparation. Next 2 digits are the heading level to identify grouping within that chapter. And the last 2 digits are termed as subheading, which describe even more specific about the product. If you remember the last webinar, or if you have attended our last webinar, our ESG speaker mentioned and introduced about Tariff Finder. You can search for the tariff classification in the Tariff Finder tool. If you have difficulty identifying the HS code of your product, you may log into Tariff Finder and search by keyword. So using the chocolate bar as an example, the Tariff Finder will display the search results for chocolates as shown in your screen. You can also visit the Singapore Customs website and search for Singapore Trade Classification, Custom and Excise Duties document, which listed all the HS code and its description. I actually strongly recommend you to save this file and refer to it when needed. So what is change in tariff classification? It means that the product must have undergone sufficient processing or manufacturing such that the foreign raw materials have undergone a change in HS code compared to the final product at the 2, 4, or the 6-digit level, which means you have to compare your raw materials HS code with the final product HS code. Your manufacturing process must be substantial to change the HS code of your foreign raw material to that of the final goods HS code. Therefore, the term HS code change. So this can be at the various level, which was shown in the previous slide, which is the change in chapter, change in heading, or change in subheading. Still not clear? It's okay. Let's take a look at some examples. Example, change in chapter, such as coconut HS code 0801 in Chapter 8 changed to coconut oil with HS code 1806 within Chapter 18. Change in heading, example, tomato with a HS code of 0702 to tomato ketchup, HS code of 2103. And lastly, change in subheading, an example I quoted here was antisteral with HS code 300210 to vaccine for human medicine 300220. So here is a simple example to illustrate what we have just went through in the past few slides. Exporting of chocolate bar with a HS code of 180632. The origin criteria is highlighted in yellow, which is change in heading. The foreign raw materials HS code are given in the table below. With this information, can you tell me if this product fulfills the origin criteria? I'll give you a few seconds to look through and I will launch a poll for you to select your answer. The polls are still coming in, so I'll wait for a few more seconds before I launch and share the result with all of you. I shall end the poll and I shall share the results. 57% said that yes, it fulfilled the origin criteria. 33% say no, and there's a small 10% who say they don't know. So to the 57%, yes, you are correct. It does fulfill the origin criteria. So the solution for this is, sorry, allow me to stop sharing the results. So the solution for this is the HS code of the final product is 180632, and the origin criteria is a change in heading, which is a 4-digit level change. So if we look at the individual raw materials HS codes and check if any of them falls into 1806, which is why I mentioned earlier it's important to classify correctly your raw materials too. So if everything is classified correctly, none of the raw materials have the same heading as the finished goods, which means the product has substantially transformed and fulfilled the change in heading criteria at the 4-digit level. Next, we move on to what most people would be familiar with, the value added rule. The origin criteria requires your product to meet a threshold percentage of local content. This criteria aims to qualify your product as Singapore origin by measuring the amount of local content that went into manufacturing it by monetary value. With that, there are generally two methods to calculate the threshold percentage, build-up method and build-down method. For the build-up method, you will add the value of 4 components: originating raw materials, direct labor and direct overhead costs, profits, and other costs, divided by the FOB value of your goods. For the build-down method, you will take the FOB value of your goods minus the value of non-originating materials. This is then divided by FOB value. We will use the same example of the chocolate bar again, but this time with a FOB value of $1. We will attempt to evaluate it with the value at origin criteria again highlighted in yellow. The costs of the respective raw materials and components are in the table below. With this information, do you think the product will fulfill the origin criteria? I'll give you a few seconds to look through. So using the build-up method, we will only take into account direct labor, overheads, and profits because all the raw materials are foreign, which means they are non-originating. With this, the original value content of manufacturing this chocolate bar is 60%, therefore fulfilling the origin criteria. You will derive the same results with the built-down method too. Under the process rule, non-originating raw materials will have to undergo an FTA-specific process to be deemed originating, such as refining. Hence, the process of refining in Singapore itself would confer originating status on the refined petroleum. However, please be reminded to check what are the process rules in each FTA, as some of our FTA partners might be reluctant to incorporate these process rules. Now we have completed the various general origin criteria. We move on to criteria that are specific for your products based on their HS code. Product-specific rules, or PSR, can be one or combination of the below. Older businesses may be familiar with the general rule concept, where there's only one rule in the past. So like for Atika, there was only the 40% rule. But now, there are other ways to hit, which is why most of the newer FTA or the renewed FTA, you will see product-specific rules. So it is important that you need to know what is your product, how it is classified, and how to check the criteria associated with that product. Not forgetting that in this rule, it can contain more stringent or even more relaxed origin criteria for your goods. For example, the value add threshold could be 60% instead of 40% for a particular HS code. Or taking ASEAN-India FTA, for example, the rule would require 35% of its content must originate from the ASEAN-India region, and non-originating raw material must have undergone at least a change in the first 6 digits of the HS code. Hence, it is important to note that in most cases, the product-specific rules usually take precedence over the general rules. So I'm back to our chocolate bar as an example again. The product-specific rules can be found in Annex 3D under the CPTPP, which is the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. You can go to fta.gov.sg and select the respective FTA under the drop-down list, and you will be able to find the product-specific rules. Next, we move on to the minimal operations. This is actually a very crucial step in evaluating whether your manufacturing process or goods qualified for the FTA. When manufacturing your goods, your production process must go beyond the minimal process to qualify. Over here, you can see these are some examples of minimal operations for the FTA. If your production process are of any or a combination of these processes, it is actually deemed to be too minimal and not substantial enough to qualify for FTA, even if it can meet the origin criteria of value add or change in HS, change in classification rules. In the context of FTA, simple can be understood by not requiring special skill or machinery in the production process. It generally describes activities which need neither special skill nor special machines or equipment to carry out the activities. As such, we strongly encourage I will strongly advise you to refer to the minimum operations and processes listed in the specific FTA for more information. Taking as an illustration, Singapore company ABC purchased essential oil in bulk from Indonesia company XYZ. When the goods arrived in Singapore, Singapore company ABC unpack it, repack it, and then relabel the product. And then they sell it to Vietnam. So my question to you is, does this operation goes beyond the minimum processing? So if you are thinking no, then yes, you are right. Because I mentioned in my previous slides that unpacking, repacking, relabeling does not go beyond the minimum processing. So if you are doing break bulking, change of packaging or fixing of labels, your product will not be qualified as Singapore originating. However, if it is within the ASEAN region, you may look into the back-to-back preferential certificate of origin, which our speakers from ESG mentioned in the last webinar. Your product can still retain the original originating status and claim preferential, but you have to ensure that you have the concerned documents in place. We have covered the contents of how to evaluate your products and manufacturing process and whether it qualifies your goods for FTA. So before I move on to my next slide, I would like to conduct a poll and would like to share. I would like to conduct a poll. Give me a minute. Let me launch the poll right now. And would like you to share with me, perhaps your company is already using any of the rules which I mentioned earlier on. I'll give you a few more seconds as the polls are still coming in. Okay, I've ended the poll, and very interesting to see quite evenly spread between the general rules. So which means that we have a fair bit of companies who are using, who is using the wholly owned rule, change in HS code, RVC, and also the process rule. Thank you. So next, I will move on to the application procedure, which you can see in your screen. There are 4 simple steps to attaining a certificate of origin for your products. 1. Register your manufacturing premises or factories with Singapore Customs. 2. Submit your cost statement for your product. 3. Apply for certificate of origin. 4. Collect the certificate of origin. Other than the authorized certificate of origin, we actually have the self-declaration region, such as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, or the ASEAN Free Trade Area uses such a region. One of the most recent implemented, the EU-US FTA on 21st November 2019, adopts such a region too. The exporter can follow the template provided in the FTA and make a self-declaration in their commercial documents, such as the sales invoice. However, it is important to note that when using such FTA, the company must do their due diligence to ensure that their goods qualified before declaring it. Hence, if you're not clear, please kindly visit Singapore Customs website, which you can find all concerned information too. Please take some time to understand, to find out, and get the procedure in place, as the penalty imposed might be very high. Besides, it also affects your business and your relationship with your importer in the long run. So as mentioned, there are two regimes using an FTA for preferential import tariff for your goods to your customer: the authorized certificate of origin or self-declaration regime. Most of you would be familiar with the authorized certificate of origin regime, such as the Form D or Form E, or you might have already been using it. So this table shows the respective FTA and their regimes. There is a provision in FTA that allows for the waiver of certificates of origin. This means that exporters do not need to present a certificate of origin as a proof of their product origin to be entitled to the preferential tariff if it is below the stipulated value. Companies will have to look up at the respective FTA to find out the threshold values that apply. Some examples of FTA and their respective threshold is presented in this table. It is vital to declare the correct valuation of your goods as well, as from our understanding, importing customs such as Korea or India will conduct verification regularly. Next, we move on to record-keeping requirements. Within each FTA, it also stipulated the number of years the relevant documents must be retained. These are documents such as your manufacturing process, costing, and other supporting documents related to the goods exported under the FTA. However, it was also mentioned that the importer shall keep records relevant to the importation in accordance with the domestic laws and regulations of the importing party. Hence, as a rule of thumb, we strongly recommend you to keep all concerned documents for 5 years as far as possible. The retention of such documents will have a critical impact that I will illustrate in the next slide. Under the FTA, importing custom has the right to verify if goods declared in the certificate of origin truly fulfills the said origin criteria, such as the value-added rule. This is where the importance of having proper documents retention plays a key role. The verification typically happens first through a written request for documentary check. Singapore Customs will facilitate this and be the liaison between the company and the importing custom authority. If this first step of documentary check is not satisfactory, the importing custom authority may even request to visit the register manufacturing premises factory to verify the process and the relevant documents. If the goods are deemed to have not met the rules of origin of the FTA, the import duties will be retroactively clawed back from your customers. So these are the penalties that imposed by Singapore Customs. Example, if you are importing into Singapore under preferential and claim to be Korea beer, but it's actually Mongolia beer, then you might be penalized and required to pay a fine for misdeclaration. But if you are exporting out, your importer may be subject to the law in the FTA country, and your importer might get penalized 3 to 4 times based on the value of your goods. And again, like I say, this will jeopardize your business and your relationship with your buyer. This is an example of false declaration penalties. And again, please kindly ensure that things are in the right way, in the correct manner, as if you make a mistake, a lot of penalties might come rolling in. The common offenses related to the FTA are the company internal lapse, where there are no proper record-keeping practices or not prompt in updating their cost statement for their goods. So after sharing on the legislation, One potential question which might come into your mind now is like, I may have declared some wrong information. How do I go about that? I just want to share, Singapore Customs has this voluntary disclosure program. And under the voluntary disclosure program, VDP, individuals and companies are encouraged to voluntarily disclose their declaration errors and omissions. You will be able to find more information in Singapore Customs website too. Hence, what are the best practice then? Familiarize with the origin criteria for your goods. Carry out due diligence to ensure materials or components classified as Singapore origin are indeed manufactured in Singapore and qualifies as originating. Maintain proper record keeping practice. Example, retain copies of your certificate of origin, respective supporting documents for at least 5 years as per what I mentioned earlier on. Hence, it is worth the pain to ensure that all is in compliance, as not only you obtain the preferential tariff, and in practice, once you are able to gain the trust of the importing custom, you might be able to get the release of your goods in a faster manner too. So in the past 30 minutes, I briefly brought you through how to evaluate if your goods can qualify for FTA, its application procedures, and the various record-keeping requirements. And lastly, some best practice to ensure proper compliance. Last but not least, I would like to refresh the resources that you can refer to. FTA.gov.sg, which you can find the legal text of Singapore FTA. Tariff Finder, which is a complementary tool for Singapore businesses, which you can find tariff and non-tariff measures for importation into more than 120 countries. Singapore Customs website, very important, and I strongly recommend you to be familiar with the Customs webpage because there's a wealth of information, such as information on certificate of origin. You can also look into the circulars and also notices on TradeNet related issues. MTI has also published a FTA booklet which shows the infographic of some FTA which you may wish to read up and get started on your FTA journey. At SBF, we provide one-to-one FTA service. So do write to us at fta@sbf.org.sg. We also regularly conduct FTA training and seminars, and hence keep a lookout at SBF website. For companies who are looking for support when engaging third-party consultants to assist in leveraging FTA to export their products to new markets, ESG Market Readiness Assistance, or the MRA grant, is able to support up to 70% of the eligible costs. For eligibility criteria and more details, please kindly visit ESG website, or you may scan the QR code to find out more. So before I end the webinar, there is a poll appearing right now in front of you. And we seek your assistance to provide feedback to us. If you have any other further question on FTA, or you would like to provide feedback as to what you would like to see in our event, such as deeper dive into any areas of FTA, you can email us at fta@sbf.org.sg. And at SBF, we regularly conduct FTA training courses that will cover more content and details of the rules of origin, such as the de minimis provision, accumulation, and other topics in FTA. So please keep a lookout at these courses in our SBF website, or you may join our FTA mailing list for any updates on this event. Lastly, we will share the presentation slide with all the attendees, and we really want to say a big thank you to all of you for your support in our webinar series. So please stay safe, take care, and have a good weekend ahead. Bye.